Listen now for a reading from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 10, verses 40 through 42. Whoever welcomes you welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Whoever welcomes a prophet as a prophet will receive a prophet's reward. And whoever welcomes a righteous person as a righteous person will receive the reward of the righteous. And whoever gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones in the name of the disciple, truly I tell you, none of these will lose their reward. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. I remember vividly the day I received the phone call that the More Light Presbyterians board was calling me to be their next executive director. I was overjoyed, of course. However, my joy was also tinged with anxiety. I was anxious about what kind of welcome I would receive stepping into this role as the first openly transgender person to serve as executive director at More Light. I wondered, would anyone be openly hostile to me? Would my email inbox and voicemail be empty because no one wanted to work with me and hoped that by ignoring me, I would just go away? Instead, much to my delight, the news that a transgender person would be stepping into this role was met with much rejoicing and celebration. Rather than confused stares and cold shoulders, I received heaps of requests from churches who had been longing to learn more about transgender experiences in order to be able to better welcome trans and non-binary people more fully. Hooray! However, I've had more than a few experiences standing in church basements and fellowship halls, back when we could still be in the same room together, teaching workshops and sharing my story as a transgender Christian, when a variation of the same comment would come my way. During the question and answer session, someone would say, "Thank you for coming to speak with us today about transgender issues. In fact, we are so glad, relieved, thankful that you are not like those other transgender people. You know, the ones who are angry or in pain all the time." I'm not even sure what else those folks even say after that, because at this point I'm just seeing red. However, I calm myself by remembering that I come in the name of the ones who sent me, both Jesus and the full cloud of witnesses of trans, fabulous people who I hold as part of my mission to make even more room for as the diverse and creative living out of God's creation. Comments like these make me wonder if, for some people in the church, an expansive and diverse welcome is just a list of checkboxes, like a live game of Pokemon Go. We've got a trans person now, check. Or insert other marginalized identity here, check. From Jesus' words to his disciples in today's text from Matthew, I'm pretty sure that checkbox welcome is not what Jesus had in mind. Jesus' short meditation on welcome comes at the end of a much longer instruction throughout chapter 10. Jesus has gathered his disciples in order to share with them some of what ministry together is going to look like. He doesn't mince words or sugarcoat that following him is not going to be easy. In verses 40 to 42, the disciples are being shown a roadmap for what they'll encounter when they go on their journeys. This text gets at the heart of what welcome means to Jesus and the one who sent him. For those of us who seek to follow Jesus and to offer an expansive welcome in our faith and in our communities, this text tells us much of what we can do. Lesson number 1, welcome as a prophet. The first lesson of Jesus' exploration of what welcome is that whoever welcomes the prophet as a prophet will receive a prophet's reward. The Common English Bible's translation of this text makes it plain. Jesus said in earlier verses that following him is likely to strip away common identities such as family, tribe, or geography. For the newly minted disciples, I could imagine if they were traveling to a new place, someone might welcome them on the basis of who their family is or where they come from. This kind of welcome would be based more on what is familiar to the one who welcomes, rather than their identity as a disciple of Christ. How many of us have experienced the kind of welcome where it is clear we've only been included because of the parts of ourselves that are comfortable or familiar for people? For many trans and non-binary people, this can mean being welcomed into their home church, but never referred to with their correct name and pronouns. For many queer couples, this can mean being welcomed at family gatherings as long as they refer to their partner as their friend and never show the fullness of their loving relationship. For many Black and brown people, this can mean being welcomed into white spaces as long as they don't talk too much about the specific experiences they have as people of color living and dying in a world dominated by white supremacy. That kind of welcome is welcome as in not turned away or excluded, but certainly does not represent welcome as in embraced for all of who they are. Lesson number 2, welcome the prophet and welcome the message. I believe the key to welcoming all of someone hinges on what it really means to welcome a prophet as a prophet. To truly welcome a prophet, you must also welcome and receive their message. Let's take a moment to remember what some of the prophets of ancient Israel foretold. Isaiah chapter 1, remove the evil of your doings from before my eyes. Cease to do evil, learn to do good, seek justice, rescue the oppressed, defend the orphan, plead for the widow. Jeremiah 5, verses 1 and 28. Run to and fro throughout the streets of Jerusalem. Look around and take note. Search its squares and see if you can find one person who acts justly and seeks the truth, so that I may pardon Jerusalem. They know no limits in deeds of wickedness. They do not judge with justice the cause of the orphan to make it prosper, and they do not defend the rights of the needy. And of course, Micah 6:8. What does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God? Sense a theme? Like Jesus, the prophets do not sugarcoat what kind of justice God requires. I believe Jesus understands deeply that welcoming a prophet's message is the hardest part of all. All throughout the Bible, prophets are run out of town, downplayed, and denied the minute their message is challenging to the status quo. Now, sometimes a prophetic word of challenge is about a needed change in behavior. Other times, that challenge is from a lament about how things have been. This is why it's so important to read Psalm 13 and hear the words of the prophets alongside Jesus' meditation on welcome. Psalm 13 is a real, raw declaration of lament and pain. The first verse of the psalm, "How long, O Lord," has become shorthand for an expression of anguish, of suffering that cannot continue. The prophets, the psalmist, and Jesus know justice cannot be effected without understanding the root of the pain it seeks to heal. The prophetic movements for gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, and asexual justice have been born out of the pain of exclusion, mistreatment, and dehumanization of LGBTQIA plus people. The prophetic messages these saints bore into the world spoke of justice badly needed for a hurting people. June 28th marks the 50th anniversary of the first Pride March to commemorate the riots and protests around the Stonewall Inn, the fateful night of June 28th, 1969, when trans and queer patrons of the bar fought back against police and state-sanctioned violence. Over the years, the signs and banners held by marchers at Pride events have become prophetic messages in their own right. Lesbians for equal employment rights. Diversity is our strength. Liberation our fight. Silence equals death. Stop violence against gays and women. The police aren't on your side either. Get your filthy laws off my body. In the Presbyterian context, our own movement for LGBTQIA+ justice was also born of protest against crushing silence and painful rejection. In 1974, at the United Presbyterian Church General Assembly, Reverend David Sent stood up and held a hand-lettered sign which read, "Is anyone else out there gay?" His action sparked the formation of the Presbyterian Gay Caucus, which later became More Light Presbyterians. In 1995, no longer able to work in the Presbyterian Church as an out lesbian, Martha Juliet decided to forego ordination knowing that it was going to be revoked from her. To mark the decision and to let the presbytery know that she was not the only LGBTQIA+ person of faith in the Presbyterian Church, she sent out a request for stoles that would be hung in the church where the presbytery was meeting. The stoles were intended to be evidence that homophobia and heterosexism affected many, many more people. Instead of the dozen stoles she expected, she received 80, almost all arriving overnight, and most of them anonymous. With that, the Shower of Stoles project was born. It has now traveled all across the country and expanded to hundreds of stoles from many denominations where LGBTQIA+ people are unable to fully serve out their callings to the church. The Shower of Stoles has become a witness to pain of exclusion and the incalculable toll of the gifts for ministry the church has lost. If we don't receive the message of pain a prophet has experienced, we can't fully enact liberation. If we proclaim Black Lives Matter without recognizing the centuries of callous disregard for Black life, it's hard to see the breadth of systemic and cultural reorganization that needs to happen so that Black lives can thrive. If we throw the doors of the church open wide for LGBTQIA+ people to find a faith home, but do not recognize the trauma and abuse we have experienced in the name of God, it is hard to create a place of worship that LGBTQIA+ folks can truly call home. Lesson number 3, welcome changes you. If true welcome is so hard to do, as we've shared, why do it? Here's why. Because as any individual or congregation that has taken seriously the invitation to include and celebrate LGBTQIA+ people can tell you, true welcome changes and transforms you. Jesus names clearly, whoever welcomes a prophet will receive a prophet's reward. This is not a top-down welcome from the powerful to the powerless. This is reciprocal welcome. Receiving a prophet and her message is meant to do something to the recipient. To welcome another as a prophet is to see the fullness of their identity, and to receive their message is ultimately to be bound up in another's liberation. In the inverse, to reject a prophet, a righteous one, or a disciple sent by Jesus is to deny Jesus and the one God who sent him. To deny physical wholeness through delayed justice is to reject the message of Jesus, the prophets, and the disciples. Justice delayed is Jesus denied. In Reverend Dr. James Cone's groundbreaking book of Black liberation theology, God of the Oppressed, he links salvation with the work for liberation and justice. The healing of the sick, the feeding of the hungry, giving sight to the blind, mean that Jesus did not regard salvation as an abstract spiritual idea or feeling in the heart. Salvation is the granting of physical wholeness in the concreteness of pain and suffering. Liberation, then, cannot be separated from the historical struggle of freedom in this world. To be liberated is not simply a status one has, but an action one undertakes as a self-conscious subject. As Dr. James Cone shares, liberation is an ongoing action. Attending a Pride March was one of the first places I experienced what liberation could feel like. For one glorious afternoon, we turned the world upside down. This is what it could look like if no one was afraid to live and love as God created and called them to be. After witnessing my first Pride in 2003, I wanted everyone to have that feeling 365 days of the year. I tasted liberation, and I realized I didn't want to keep it to myself. In many recent years, Pride events have felt like a celebration of individual freedom. We're here, we're queer, hooray! As LGBTQIA+ rights and recognition have increased, Pride has become a spectacle of look how far we've come. Look, even Delta Airlines and Chase Bank have a float. Amid the joyful shouts of celebration, you could hear the undercurrents of lament. How long, O Lord? How long must the LGBTQIA+ community prop up companies who profit off of private prisons? How long must we invite police presence into our festivities? How long must the labors of trans women who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color go unrecognized and underfunded? Pride is different this year. In many ways, it's back to its roots. We are being asked to do more than offer a spectator's welcome, more than watch a float go by and dance in our feather boa. The joy of Pride has never been about celebrating the Bank of America float, but in seeing the full array of incredible diversity of the LGBTQIA+ community gathered together, united, unafraid, reclaiming our public place in the world. The joy of Pride is in the connection to the community, to the saints like Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, Harvey Milk, Larry Kramer, those who came before us, everyone who surrounds us now, and those who will come in the wake of the path we trod. Ultimately, the reward for welcoming the prophet, the disciple, and Jesus is drawing closer to the one God who sends them. Every time I attend a march for Pride or a protest for justice, I catch a glimpse of the kingdom community God intends for us to share on earth as it is in heaven. This year, we may not be marching in Pride altogether, but we can participate in the profound act of welcoming and receiving those whom God has called to bear a message of justice in the name of Jesus. We participate in Pride when we allow ourselves to be transformed by the prophetic word we hear, to lay down our nets, to follow Jesus with the urgency of understanding justice cannot be delayed any longer. This is Pride. Amen.